The morning sun flooded through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting golden light across marble floors and designer furniture worth more than most people earn in a lifetime. But in the master bedroom of this Marina Bay penthouse, a 44-year-old property developer lay motionless in silk sheets, his eyes fixed and vacant. His wife's screams shattered the silence as she stumbled backward from the bed, phone trembling in her hands. The paramedics would arrive within minutes, but they were already too late. A millionaire was dead, and the woman who had promised to love him forever would soon become the prime suspect. But was she truly the devoted wife she appeared to be, or had he married his own killer? Stay with me to the very end to find out. Welcome to True Crime Journal HQ. Thanks to all our viewers and subscribers for your support. Stay with us for daily update on the most shocking true crime stories. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Leonard Kwek entered the world on the 12th of August 1980 in a modest HDB flat in Toa Payoh. His parents ran a small hardware store, working 16-hour days to give their only son opportunities they never had. Young Leonard watched his father negotiate with suppliers, saw his mother balance ledgers by candlelight, and absorbed every lesson about money and survival. By age 10, he was already flipping second-hand electronics at school, turning a profit before most kids understood what profit meant. His teenage years were defined by relentless ambition. While classmates spent weekends at arcades, Leonard studied property magazines and attended open houses, fascinated by how empty spaces could transform into gold mines. He graduated from National University of Singapore with a degree in real estate, but the real education came from walking construction sites, schmoozing with contractors, and learning which neighborhoods were about to explode in value. At 25, Leonard made his first major investment, a rundown shop house in Chinatown that everyone said was a waste of money. 18 months later, he sold it for triple the price. That single deal became his blueprint. By 30, he owned a portfolio of commercial properties across Singapore's central business district. By 35, his net worth had crossed $15 million. By 40, he was worth over $30 million, with holdings that generated passive income most people couldn't fathom. But success came with casualties. His first marriage to Michelle, a corporate lawyer, started with promise in 2015. They were the power couple everyone envied: attractive, wealthy, unstoppable. Except Leonard's obsession with control poisoned everything. He monitored her phone calls, questioned her late nights at the office, and exploded with jealousy whenever male colleagues were mentioned. Michelle tolerated it for 3 years before filing for divorce in 2018, walking away with a settlement that bruised Leonard's ego more than his bank account. The divorce left him defensive and isolated. He threw himself deeper into work, acquiring properties like they could fill the void. Friends from university drifted away, tired of conversations that always circled back to deals and returns on investment. His brother Marcus tried to set him up on dates, but Leonard sabotaged each one, either too controlling or too distant to connect. He'd sit in his penthouse overlooking the glittering cityscape, surrounded by evidence of his success, and feel absolutely nothing. By early 2023, Leonard was spiraling into a particular kind of loneliness that only the wealthy truly understand, the nagging suspicion that nobody wanted him for who he was, only for what he had. He craved genuine connection but had forgotten how to trust. He wanted someone to share his life with, but couldn't stop treating relationships like business transactions. He was vulnerable in ways he'd never admit, desperate for affection but terrified of being used. Have you ever felt lonely despite having everything? This was Leonard Kwek at 44, successful, guarded, achingly alone, and about to meet someone who would see his vulnerability as opportunity. Clara was born on the 3rd of May, 1998, in a cramped concrete house in the Duljo Fatima district of Cebu City. Her father abandoned the family when she was 6, leaving her mother Rosa to raise 4 children alone. Rosa worked as a laundry woman, scrubbing other people's clothes for 60 pesos a day, while her own kids wore hand-me-downs with holes. Clara learned early that poverty wasn't romantic, it was humiliating, exhausting, and suffocating. School became her escape route. While her younger siblings played in trash-filled streets, Clara studied under flickering bulbs, determined to be the one who lifted them all out. She graduated top of her class and won a partial scholarship to study nursing at Cebu Doctors University. But partial meant her mother still borrowed money from loan sharks at 40% interest, a debt that would haunt them for years. Nursing school was brutal. Clara juggled classes with part-time work at a local clinic, surviving on instant noodles and 3 hours of sleep. She watched classmates drop out when tuition came due, their dreams evaporating because they were born to the wrong families. Clara refused to be another statistic. She graduated in 2019 with honors and immediately started applying for overseas positions where Filipino nurses were in demand. Singapore accepted her application in early 2020. The salary, 3,000 Singapore dollars monthly, felt like winning the lottery. She could send half home and still live better than she ever had. But reality hit fast. After rent, food, and transportation, she barely had 1,500 left. Back home, her mother's kidney disease required dialysis twice weekly at 8,000 pesos per session. Her brother needed university tuition, her sisters needed school supplies, uniforms, and hope. Clara became a human ATM machine. Every payday, her phone exploded with messages. 8 Clara, I need money for books. The clinic won't treat mama without payment. The loan sharks came to the house again. The math never worked. No matter how much she sent, it was never enough. She picked up extra shifts until exhaustion became her baseline. She skipped meals. She wore the same 3 uniforms in rotation. Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below. By 2023, Clara was drowning. Her dreams of saving money, maybe opening a small business, traveling beyond hospital walls, all gone. She was 25 years old and felt 50. She'd sacrificed everything and still couldn't save her family. The weight crushed her daily, a pressure that made her chest tight and her thoughts dangerous. What would you do if your family's survival depended entirely on you? If you made it to this point, drop a comment with, I'm still here. Let's see who is still watching. This was Clara Fabro when she met Leonard Quek, desperate, exhausted, and about to make choices that would destroy multiple lives. If you're enjoying this content, like, subscribe, and share it with your loved ones to protect them from the same tragedy happening to them in the future. March 2023. Leonard Quek checked into Mount Elizabeth Hospital for a routine gallbladder procedure. Annoyed at the inconvenience, but unconcerned about the surgery itself, he was assigned to the gastroenterology ward on the 7th floor, where Clara Fabro was working the day shift. Their first interaction was unremarkable. Clara took his vitals, explained the pre-op procedures, and maintained the professional distance she'd perfected over 3 years. But Leonard noticed her immediately, the way she moved with quiet efficiency, how her smile seemed genuine rather than the mechanical pleasantness most nurses offered. When she returned to check his IV, he asked where she was from. That simple question opened a conversation that stretched beyond her usual 2-minute patient check-ins. Clara found herself lingering. Leonard was different from the demanding patients who treated nurses like servants. He asked about her family, seemed genuinely interested in her life in Cebu, made her laugh with self-deprecating stories about his failed attempts to cook anything beyond instant noodles. For those brief moments, she forgot about the unpaid dialysis bills waiting in her phone's message inbox. Over the next 3 days of his hospital stay, their conversations deepened. Leonard requested Clara specifically for his medication rounds. She found excuses to check on him more frequently than necessary. There was chemistry undeniable and unexpected, but for Clara, every laugh they shared was shadowed by guilt. Was this real attraction, or was her desperate brain recognizing opportunity? When Leonard was discharged, he asked for her number. Clara hesitated for exactly 3 seconds before writing it down. Their first date was dinner at a hawker center, his choice, surprisingly humble. The second was at a rooftop bar overlooking the marina. By the 3rd week, they were inseparable. Clara's fellow nurses at the hospital whispered concerns during break-room gossip. He's too old for you. Rich men like that always have conditions. Be careful. Clara, her best friend Maria, pulled her aside one evening. I know you need money, but don't lose yourself chasing it. Clara bristled at the implications. You think I'm using him? Maybe he actually likes me. Maybe someone finally sees me as more than a walking paycheck for my family. But late at night, alone in her tiny rental room, Clara calculated, if they married, if something happened to him, if the money could finally solve everything. But this fairy tale romance was about to take a dark turn. September 2023. 6 months after their first meeting, Leonard took Clara to Sentosa Beach at sunset and dropped to one knee. The diamond ring caught the fading light as he asked her to be his wife. Clara's tears were real, a confusing mixture of joy, relief, and shame she couldn't untangle. She said yes. The happiness lasted exactly 4 days. That's when Leonard's lawyer arrived at the penthouse with a prenuptial agreement thicker than a medical textbook. Leonard explained it casually, as if discussing dinner plans. Just standard protection. My assets stay mine. If we divorce, you get a modest settlement. Nothing personal, just business. Clara read through pages of legal language that essentially said she'd leave the marriage with almost nothing if it ended. Her hands trembled. Every clause screamed what his family already believed, that she was a gold digger, that her love couldn't be real, that she was temporary and disposable. Would you sign a prenup that questioned your intentions? But one clause caught her attention, buried on page 17. In the event of Leonard's death during the marriage, his spouse would inherit 40% of his estate, with the remainder split among blood relatives. 40% of $30 million. $12 million. Enough to save her mother, educate her siblings, and never worry about money again. Clara signed. The wedding in November was small and tense. Leonard's brother Marcus barely concealed his contempt, pulling Leonard aside to hiss loud enough for Clara to hear, "You're making a massive mistake. She's half your age and counting your money." Leonard's cousins were cold, his business associates confused. Only Clara's family attended via video call from Cebu, crying with joy at their daughter's supposed good fortune. "Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below." Clara stood in her simple white dress, repeating vows she half meant, watching Marcus glare at her from the front row. She was now Mrs. Queck, living in a penthouse, married to a millionaire. Everything should have felt perfect. If you made it to this point, drop a comment with, "I'm still here. Let's see who is still watching." Instead, she felt trapped. And that clause about inheritance kept replaying in her mind like a forbidden song she couldn't stop humming. If you're enjoying this content, like, subscribe, and share it with your loved ones to protect them from the same tragedy happening to them in the future. The honeymoon phase died within weeks. Leonard's controlling tendencies, barely visible during courtship, exploded once Clara moved into the penthouse. He installed tracking software on her phone, disguising it as safety precaution for my wife. He questioned every outing, every friend, every minute she spent away from him. When Clara mentioned grabbing coffee with Maria from the hospital, Leonard's jaw tightened. "Why do you need friends when you have me?" Her nursing shifts became battlegrounds. Leonard would call repeatedly during her rounds, demanding to know who she was talking to, which doctors were on duty, why she hadn't answered within 30 seconds. Clara's colleagues noticed the change, how she'd flinch when her phone buzzed, how the light had drained from her eyes. Family gatherings with the Quecks were psychological warfare. Marcus never missed an opportunity to undermine her. "How's the weather in gold digger land, Clara?" he'd say with a smile that never reached his eyes. Leonard's cousins made jokes about mail-order brides while Leonard sat silent, offering no defense. Clara would smile through gritted teeth, counting minutes until she could escape. Meanwhile, her phone exploded with messages from Cebu. Her mother's condition worsened, the dialysis wasn't enough anymore. She needed a kidney transplant that cost 2 million pesos. Her brother's university threatened expulsion over unpaid tuition. Her youngest sister needed braces. The loan sharks were circling the house, threatening violence. Each message was a knife twisting deeper. Clara sent what she could, but Leonard monitored every transaction. "Why does your family need so much money?" he'd demand, as if her mother's failing kidneys were a personal inconvenience to him. The irony choked her. She'd married a millionaire and somehow had less financial freedom than when she was single. December 2023. Clara's resentment calcified into something harder. Late at night, while Leonard slept, she'd lie awake doing math that never added up. She'd open her laptop and type searches she immediately deleted. Digitalis overdose symptoms, undetectable poisons, inheritance laws, Singapore. Each search felt like stepping closer to an invisible edge. At the hospital, Clara started asking colleagues oddly specific questions. How quickly does Digitalis act? What would a lethal dose look like? Do toxicology screens catch everything? She framed it as academic curiosity, updating her pharmaceutical knowledge. Nobody suspected the real reason. The psychological threshold came on a January evening when her mother called, sobbing. The dialysis center had refused treatment without immediate payment. "I'm dying, Clara. I can feel it. Please, Anak, I don't want to die." Clara hung up and stared at Leonard, who was yelling at his laptop screen about stock prices. $30 million, sitting right there, wasted on a man who'd rather track her phone than show actual love. A man whose death would solve every problem crushing her family. The thought should have horrified her. Instead, it felt like relief. What happened next would seal Leonard's fate. Clara's research became methodical. Digitalis, derived from foxglove plants, was used to treat heart conditions, but turned lethal in higher doses. The symptoms mimicked natural cardiac problems: nausea, fatigue, irregular heartbeat, confusion. Most importantly, doctors rarely suspected poisoning, unless specifically looking for it. In therapeutic doses, it saved lives. In Clara's hands, it would become a weapon. Accessing it was easier than it should have been. Mount Elizabeth Hospital's medication inventory system had gaps, especially for cardiac drugs distributed across multiple wards. Clara had worked there long enough to know which supervisors were careless, which storage rooms had faulty cameras, which shifts were understaffed. Over 3 weeks in January 2024, she siphoned small amounts, never enough to trigger audits, always covered by her legitimate access codes. She planned everything with the precision of a surgical procedure. Start with minimal doses to establish a pattern of declining health, gradual escalation to avoid suspicion, 3 months maximum from first dose to death. Make it look like stress-related heart failure in a man who worked too hard and lived too intensely. Early February, Clara crushed her first pill into Leonard's morning coffee. Her hands shook as she stirred it in, but her face remained calm. Leonard drank it without noticing the slightly bitter aftertaste she masked with extra sugar. Within days, Leonard complained of fatigue. "Must be working too hard," he muttered, rubbing his chest. By week 2, he mentioned dizziness during their argument about her phone usage. Week 3 brought heart palpitations that woke him at night, gasping and disoriented. Clara transformed into the devoted wife. She booked doctor appointments, held his hand during consultations, and described his symptoms with concerned precision, carefully omitting details that might point toward poisoning. "He's been so stressed lately," she'd tell physicians, her eyes wide with worry. Could it be his heart? His father died young from cardiac arrest. Have you ever witnessed someone hiding their true intentions behind a perfect mask? The doctors ran standard tests: ECG, blood pressure, cholesterol panels. Everything came back within normal ranges for a man his age under stress. They prescribed rest, exercise, stress management. No one ordered the specialized toxicology screen that would have exposed everything. Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below. Leonard's brother Marcus grew suspicious, but for the wrong reasons. He accused Clara of stressing Leonard out, of being a burden. The irony was suffocating. Marcus blamed her presence when he should have been investigating her actions. If you made it to this point, drop a comment with, "I'm still here." Let's see who is still watching. March arrived. Clara increased the doses. Leonard's symptoms intensified: severe nausea, vision problems, profound weakness. He could barely work. His complexion turned grayish. And through it all, Clara played her role perfectly, the concerned wife slowly watching her husband fade. If you're enjoying this content, like, subscribe, and share it with your loved ones to protect them from the same tragedy happening to them in the future. The 15th of March 2024. Friday morning arrived with deceptive normalcy. The alarm chimed at 7. Leonard rolled over, coughing, a sound that had become routine over the past month. Clara was already awake, had been for hours, staring at the ceiling and rehearsing what came next. She prepared breakfast as always: scrambled eggs, toast, freshly squeezed orange juice. But this morning's orange juice contained something extra, a dose of digitalis 3 times higher than anything she'd given before. Enough to stop a healthy heart, let alone one already weakened by weeks of poisoning. Leonard sat at the dining table in his bathrobe, scrolling through emails on his tablet. "I have that meeting with the contractor at 11, he said absently. "Can you make sure my blue suit is ready?" "Of course," Clara replied, her voice steady as she set the glass in front of him. She watched him drink. Every swallow felt like a countdown. He drained half the glass before pushing it aside, too nauseous to finish. 30 minutes later, Leonard stood to shower but stumbled, gripping the counter. "Clara, something's wrong," his words slurred. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the air conditioning. "Let me help you to bed," she said, guiding him back to the bedroom. His breathing became labored, erratic. His lips took on a bluish tint. His eyes found hers, confused and scared, as if asking why this was happening. Clara stepped back and watched. It took 14 minutes. His body convulsed twice. His hand reached out, whether for help or accusation she'd never know. Then stillness. Absolute and final. She waited exactly 2 minutes before calling emergency services, practicing her screams, first raw, panicked, convincing. When she finally dialed, her performance was flawless. "Please help, my husband, he's not breathing. Please hurry." Paramedics arrived within 8 minutes. Clara met them at the door, tears streaming, hands shaking. She'd bitten her lip hard enough to draw blood, adding authenticity to her distress. They rushed past her while she collapsed against the wall, sobbing. The paramedics worked frantically but declared Leonard dead at the scene. Time of death, 8:47 a.m. Preliminary assessment, cardiac arrest. Clara wailed, crumpled on the floor, neighbors gathering in the hallway to witness her grief. The police arrived for routine documentation. Clara told them everything, his recent health problems, the doctor visits, how worried she'd been. Her tears never stopped, her story never wavered. But someone wasn't buying Clara's tears. Marcus Queck arrived at the penthouse an hour after his brother's death, pushing past the police tape with fury in his eyes. He found Clara in the living room, wrapped in a blanket, surrounded by sympathetic officers. Their eyes met, and Marcus saw something flicker across her face before the grief mask returned. That flicker was enough. "I want an autopsy," Marcus announced to the officer in charge. "A full toxicology screen. Everything." Clara's head snapped up. "Why would you? Your brother just died, and you're already—" "Because 44-year-old men don't just drop dead," Marcus cut her off. "Especially not conveniently wealthy ones married to women half their age." The officer tried to calm the situation, but Marcus wouldn't back down. He hired Singapore's top pathologist privately and demanded the police treat this as a potential homicide investigation. Detective Sarah Chen from the Criminal Investigation Department was assigned to the case within 24 hours. 2 weeks later, the toxicology report landed on Detective Chen's desk like a bomb. Digitalis. Not trace amounts, lethal concentrations that indicated prolonged, deliberate poisoning. Leonard Queck hadn't died of natural causes. He'd been murdered. What would you do if you suspected a family member was murdered? Detective Chen built her case methodically. She subpoenaed Clara's phone records, revealing those deleted search queries that weren't quite as deleted as Clara thought. Digitalis, overdose symptoms, inheritance laws, Singapore widow. How long does toxicology take? Each search was time-stamped, creating a damning timeline that started in late December. Clara's browser history told an even darker story: forums about undetectable poisons, articles about Black Widow killers, obsessive research into Leonard's life insurance policies, and estate planning documents. Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below. Hospital records became crucial. Mount Elizabeth's medication inventory showed irregularities in Digitalis distribution, coinciding with Clara's shifts. Security footage captured her entering the cardiac medication storage room 17 times in 6 weeks, far more than her duties required. Her supervisor, when questioned, admitted Clara had been asking unusual questions about cardiac drugs for months. If you made it to this point, drop a comment with, "I'm still here." Let's see who is still watching. Detective Chen interviewed Clara's colleagues. Maria, her best friend, reluctantly revealed Clara's financial desperation and her increasingly cold remarks about Leonard. She said he was suffocating her. Maria whispered that she felt trapped. "I thought she meant emotionally, not. I never imagined." The medical examiner reconstructed the poisoning timeline using tissue samples and hair analysis. The evidence showed systematic poisoning beginning in early February, escalating through March. The final dose on March 15 was massive, designed to kill quickly. Every thread led back to Clara. Her motive was clear: $12 million in inheritance and freedom from a controlling marriage. Her means were obvious: medical access and knowledge. Her opportunity was constant. She prepared his food, managed his medications, controlled his daily routine. If you're enjoying this content, like, subscribe, and share it with your loved ones to protect them from the same tragedy happening to them in the future. The evidence web tightened like a noose. Detective Chen had everything she needed. The 12th of April, 2024. Detective Chen and 3 officers arrived at the penthouse at dawn. Clara answered the door in pajamas, her face composed until she saw the handcuffs. "Clara Fabro Quek, you're under arrest for the murder of Leonard Quek." "This is insane," Clara said, her voice rising with practiced shock. "I loved my husband. Marcus put you up to this. He never wanted us together. This is harassment." At the police station, Clara maintained her innocence through the first 4 hours of interrogation. She was the grieving widow, the victim of a vindictive brother-in-law, the immigrant nurse being scapegoated because she wasn't born wealthy. Then, Detective Chen opened her folder. "Let's talk about your Google searches." December 28, digitalis overdose symptoms. January 3, undetectable poisons. January 15, inheritance laws, Singapore. Clara's face paled. "I'm a nurse. I research medications all the time. At 2 in the morning? While lying next to your husband?" Detective Chen slid security footage across the table. "This is you, entering the cardiac medication storage room 17 times. Want to explain why?" The evidence came one by one: hospital logs, phone records, toxicology reports, financial searches. Each piece dismantled another layer of Clara's defense until there was nothing left but the truth. 6 hours into interrogation, Clara's carefully constructed composure shattered. Tears, real ones this time, streamed down her face. "He was suffocating me," she whispered. "You don't understand what it was like. He tracked my every move, questioned everything, treated me like property he'd purchased." "So you killed him?" "I just wanted to breathe," Clara's voice cracked. "My mother was dying. My family was drowning in debt. I was working myself to exhaustion, and he had everything and gave me nothing but control and suspicion. The prenup meant I'd leave with almost nothing unless he died." The full confession spilled out over the next 2 hours. The stolen digitalis, the gradual poisoning, the final fatal dose, the performance afterward. Detective Chen traced wire transfers Clara had made to the Philippines, 20,000 Singapore dollars sent to her family in the weeks before Leonard's death, as if preparing for the windfall she expected. Back in Cebu, Rosa Fabro collapsed when police informed her. Her daughter, her hope, her provider a murderer. Singapore's Filipino community reeled in shock. The case dominated headlines. Filipina nurse poisons millionaire husband. Clara became the embodiment of their worst fears about how they'd be perceived. But the courtroom drama was just beginning. The trial began in August 2024 at the State Courts of Singapore. Lead prosecutor James Tan presented a devastating case of premeditated murder driven by greed. He displayed Clara's search history on courtroom screens, walked the jury through the medication theft timeline, and brought in toxicology experts who explained exactly how she'd poisoned Leonard systematically over 6 weeks. This wasn't a crime of passion, Tan argued. This was calculated, methodical, execution disguised as devotion. Clara Fabro married Leonard Quek for his money and killed him when the prenup made divorce financially pointless. Clara's defense attorney, Michelle Wong, countered with a narrative of coercive control and psychological abuse. She presented evidence of Leonard's tracking software, testimonies from Clara's colleagues about his obsessive phone calls, and expert witnesses on domestic abuse patterns. Wong argued Clara had diminished capacity due to sustained psychological trauma and family pressure. "My client made a terrible choice," Wong conceded, "but understand the impossible position she was trapped in, controlled by a possessive husband, crushed by family obligations, isolated and desperate." The prosecution wheeled out damning evidence: the $12 million inheritance motive, Clara's cold calculations found in a journal hidden in the penthouse, witnesses who testified she'd asked about inheritance laws weeks before the poisoning started. Character witnesses painted conflicting portraits. Clara's hospital colleagues described her as caring and hard-working. Leonard's business partners remembered him as demanding but fair. Marcus testified about his brother's loneliness and desperate search for love, his voice breaking as he described finding Leonard's body. Clara took the stand in her own defense. Tears flowed as she described her desperate circumstances, her mother's illness, Leonard's controlling behavior. But under cross-examination, her story wavered. Prosecutor Tan caught her in contradictions, exposed her self-serving justifications. "Did you love him, or love what he could provide?" Tan asked pointedly. Clara had no answer. "Do you think her circumstances justified her actions? Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below." The jury deliberated for 11 hours. The verdict: guilty of first-degree murder. If you made it to this point, drop a comment with, "I'm still here. Let's see who is still watching." Sentencing came 2 weeks later. Life imprisonment without possibility of parole for 20 years. Marcus read a victim impact statement, his grief raw and unfiltered. "She didn't just kill my brother. She killed his hope, his trust, his belief that someone could love him for who he was." Clara's final words were quiet. "I'm sorry. To Leonard, to my family, to everyone. I destroyed everything trying to save it." If you're enjoying this content, like, subscribe, and share it with your loved ones to protect them from the same tragedy happening to them in the future. Clara Fabro-Quek now resides in Changi Women's Prison, where she'll remain for at least 2 decades before parole consideration. The luxury penthouse, designer clothes, and promised security have been replaced by a small cell and the endless weight of her choices. Prison reports indicate she spends hours writing letters to her family, letters filled with apologies that can never undo the damage. Back in Cebu, Rosa Fabro's health continues declining. The dialysis treatments Clara desperately tried to secure through destruction now come sporadically, funded by relatives and charity organizations. Her siblings struggle forward without their sister's financial support, carrying the shame of association with a convicted poisoner. The family Clara tried to save was ultimately shattered by her actions. Leonard's estate was divided among his blood relatives, according to the prenuptial agreement's alternate provisions. Marcus inherited the majority, using portions to establish a scholarship fund for business students at the National University of Singapore, a tribute to his brother's journey from modest beginnings to success. Singapore's Filipino community grappled with the case's aftermath, facing renewed scrutiny and stereotyping. Community leaders emphasized that Clara's actions represented one person's catastrophic choices, not an entire community's character. The warning signs were visible throughout. Leonard's controlling behavior that isolated Clara, her desperate financial situation that created impossible pressure, the rushed courtship that prevented either from truly knowing the other, and family hostility that offered no support system. This case reveals desperation's terrible price. 2 lives ended that March morning, one physically, one through imprisonment. Families on 2 continents remain broken, and the question lingers: could tragedy have been prevented if someone had intervened earlier? Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments. What would you have done differently if you were in Leonard's position?